So there's so many things that I want to ask you, and I know so many people that I know that have read your beautiful books, and so many parents that I know have a million questions. So I tried really hard to just condense it to the ones that I feel are most just relevant right now, especially this year, because I know people are really very aware that some of their trauma and the healing work that they've been working on for many years, it's like it's come to this pivotal point right now where integration is such a focus for so many people. And I mean, I don't know, I just feel there's something spiritual going on where a lot of us are really focused on just inner harmony. And I'm curious as to your journey. Are there some pivotal moments that you can share that maybe led you to finding this work and just being such a pioneer in this space and finding your purpose to what you do today?
I think that threading through my life was this incessant desire to learn more about myself. I knew from my early 20s that I was here in this life not to make money, not to have a marriage, not to have children, as much as it was to really develop a true self-understanding. And so I was a seeker from a young age. And I wanted to not waste this life not having understood myself. And that's why I studied psychology. I wrote books on self-growth because that has always been my focus. So every pivotal moment in my life, finishing a PhD, writing my first book, having my first child, getting married, getting divorced, life after divorce, all of it has been pointers, arrows, just leading me toward greater self-growth. And I think for people, if self-growth is the point of it all, then every experience, bad or good, helps that. And you frame every pain as a portal, as an agent, a catalyst of growth and change. So I think having the right perspective of being a spiritual seeker is so important to frame all your life relationships.
It's so good. Yeah. And I think, like, in terms of archetypes, I definitely have the seeker as well. There's just something in my soul that, you know, just sitting around and not really trying to have a deeper understanding of experiences. I just can't let it go. It just won't leave me. And I love that you also find that. One of the things I love about how you use social media is you will give a very clear question of what you're going to talk about. And the nuggets, like I found over the years, they always seem to come up at the right time for me. And one of the ones that I love that you talked about was the 3 pillars of self-growth. And I wondered if you could just kind of summarize that for us.
What are the 3 pillars, Lee? You got to say that. Because this is just a pointer for you, because authors, we write it and then we don't remember, because in that moment we called it that. And you have, so whenever I do an interview, I always say, you said this, that, what did you mean, So
Yeah.
you'll have to edit.
Well, I think one of the things that you just touched on in the last question was that awareness, of becoming very self-aware of, without judging, what is this experience trying to teach me? And
Yeah.
I think that for me, that's always been really important, to try to not have the judgment around, like, what can I learn from this experience? And
Yes.
instead of being hard on myself or having that self-blame, or guilt, or all of those emotions that don't serve you at all, without judgment or attachment, what am I developing right now? And I feel like that's something that I always learn from you, even just listening to a lot of your interviews. It's something that I've always found to be just a reminder. It's not that we don't know this information, but I think if we're on a journey to working with you with self-growth, I just wanted, you to kind of share sort of what are some of the common things you would teach people like me who, are on the path, to just remember very, very simply along the journey, especially during difficult times.
Well, I think, again, that the main part is that we are co-creating our reality. We're not creating it, and we're not just blind and passive recipients of reality. We're co-participants, we're co-shapers, and taking charge of that experience is so important for us, because otherwise then we, wallow in martyrdom or self-blame or just victimhood, thinking that we have no charge, no agency. And I think when you begin to become a seeker, you begin to observe how your patterns are directly impacting the present moment. As much as the moment is impacting you, you are impacting the moment. Your perceptions of a moment are coming from your preloaded belief systems. So becoming aware that you're coming to every moment with a preloading automatically helps you to then ask, well, how can I manage my part of the dynamic? I cannot manage all parts of the dynamic. So if it is torrentially downpouring with rain, I cannot control that. But what I can control is my experience of the rain. And uncovering your patterns helps you to, pivot towards reactions and behaviors that foster your own advancement. Most of the time we're engaging in behaviors and reactions that are to our detriment.
Yeah.
The other day I was talking to a wife who wanted more attention from her husband, and her tactic, her reaction, and her pattern was to whine and crib and complain, and she was inadvertently pushing him further away. So the very thing she wanted, she was actually not attracting into her life because she wasn't aware of her patterns.
I think just touching on that, I know for me, I spent a good 10 years kind of contemplating that question, because I think there is a lot of material out there where it's like you create your own reality, and then you feel guilt if you're not seeing what you're trying to create, and you focus on like, is it me? And I think it can create a little bit of a virus of the mind a little bit, where there's all this guilt that, well, I must be doing something wrong if I'm not creating what it is I desire. And I think that's the important piece, is the co-creating, because
Yeah, you're not creating anything.
yeah.
You're not creating, if you're married to an abusive partner, you didn't create that, but you are co-creating its perpetuation.
That's
If you
beautiful.
if you walk into a bank and there's a bank robber, you didn't create that, but you're co-creating everything that happens after that. So, we're not creators, and people in the manifestation world and positive psychology world will tell people, you can create your experience. No, you can't. If I get invaded right now by two armed burglars, I didn't create that, but I can co-create what happens after that, right? So there are random events that happen, like the bank robbery or the torrential downpour on your wedding day. That is the X factor of life. It's always unknown. How we interact with the X factor is our co-creation. But people shouldn't think that it's their fault that they were raped at the age of 12, and many times people mistakenly believe that, oh, I attracted this evil person into my life. No, you didn't attract the evil person. You're just attracting how you interact with the evil person.
That is exactly what I think people feel. They've been trained the opposite, that I must have made this situation happen. So I
Right.
love that you're touching on that, but we can focus on how we move forward. What do we do with that situation? And how do we
Right.
manage our own behaviors moving forward?
Right.
I like that.
Right. And I work with a lot of women who've been in abusive relationships, and they will get upset and, have a lot of shame and guilt. How did I allow this to happen to me and my children? And I always say, you allowed it to happen to you because you didn't know. And once you know, then you're responsible.
Yeah.
So sometimes, once there was a really negative coworker that really betrayed me, and people would come up to me and say, oh, how come you attracted her?
Yeah.
I said, I didn't attract her. I attracted the dynamic that continued, but the fact that she came into my life was not my fault, but I was participating after that. And then once I came to know, then I changed the dynamic.
Yes.
And so we have to have compassion for ourselves that once you know, what did you do with the information? But if you're oblivious and you don't realize somebody's stealing from you or somebody's talking behind your back, you should not take extra responsibility for things that you don't know.
Yeah, that's so magic. I love that. One question that comes up a lot in our community is the topic of being too controlling. And that's something that I have really focused on, especially in my 20s. I mean, now I'm in my 40s, but it's like noticing when I try to control others, what's behind that. And I think a lot of people have a question for you is what happens now that I'm aware that I do it? And it's a bit of an addiction. Why do I do it? And now that I'm aware of it, do you have some strategies for how I can kind of move through and past that?
Yeah, we do it most with our children because our children are young and naive and vulnerable, and they don't know how to fend us off until they're teenagers and older. Like I love when my daughter tells me, "Mom, stop." Like she says stop to me at least once a day because I'm crossing over my line and my lane to her lane. And it's a practice. So it's not easy. We're always trying to manage others because we want them to fit into the image of what we think they should be. And we have to either surround ourselves with very strong people who tell us to stop, like my daughter does, or we have to do it, out of our own integrity. And we have to watch when are we overstepping our lane. We're typically doing it because we are so narcissistic that we think the other person should reflect what we think they should reflect, and or we're doing it because we're anxious that if they don't reflect what I think they should reflect, that bears on me, that looks bad on me. So the best thing we can do, the first step is to own it. Tell your partner, I know I'm so controlling, but can you wear this shirt, please? Or I know I'm so controlling, but can you please just come and say hello to grandma and kiss her and hug her the way I want? At least own it. Don't pretend like you're caring when you're actually controlling.
It's so hard with kids because you love them so much. And you do, like, I found when they were younger, I was actually more controlling. Now that they're, 8, 9, and 11, I'm honoring them more. But when they were a little bit younger, I was like, even if you don't want to wear this outfit, like you have to wear it so you look cute, just little things like that. Then I was like, doing it with my husband too, or in intimate relationships. I feel like that's when it's such a teacher because hopefully if you are a seeker, you start noticing like, why do I do this so much? Like, what is it about me that has this obsession with controlling the behaviors or like trying to mold somebody into my image? And
because we think that who they are is going to shed light on who we are. And because we don't feel good enough, we need them to make sure that they look their best so we feel better about ourselves. The more better you feel about yourself, the less you're going to use them to fill your cup, to represent you. They are not your brand ambassadors. They're not your representatives in the city council. They are their own beings in their own right. But because we feel not good enough, we want to borrow from everybody, especially in our family. We think it's our right that they should represent us and make us look amazing because we had them. We decided to have a family. Now they have to show up so that we look good.
right.
And it's a real perversion and sickness, and a little bit is normal, but very quickly it becomes pathological.
So when you are working with clients who now they're clearly aware that it is maybe more chronic, is there a couple of things you tell them to do to help them? Because I find sometimes if it is a bit of an addiction, like they might not know how to change or what to do.
Yeah, I think you have to go on a detox. You have to really push yourself to listen to what is coming out of your mouth, to give yourself a limit on how many commands,
That's
instructions,
good. That's good.
questions you ask your child. You know, I have like, okay, I've finished my quota for the day and then I'll save it for the next day, because my questions are incessant. How is this? What did you do? And I know I only have a quota of 2 or 3 before she shuts me down, right? So my daughter's 21, so she doesn't have, any compunction in shutting me down, which I'm grateful for, because if given the leeway, I would go to town, right? So we have to put limits on ourselves, or we hope that others will put limits on us, but we have to observe, how many times am I telling somebody else what to do? How can I turn that instruction back to myself? How can I turn that instruction to silence? How can I pick and choose what I want to focus on instead of giving 50 commands and the child has just woken up? Brush your teeth, put your hair, comb your hair, do your bed, pick up your shoes, pack your bag, come and eat your breakfast, have a smoothie. I mean, how many things? Come and give me a hug, say goodbye. How many things?
Yeah, that was me.
Once I was right. I was counseling a client and she had like a list of like 12 things the poor 6-year-old had to do before she even left her room. She had to put the clothes in the hamper. She had to pull out her clothes. She had to take out her school bag. I was like, that is too much.
But I mean, we live in a dysfunctional society where it's almost, we feel that's normal to be like that, and we are raised in that kind of energy. So now we're trying to break the mold and go against the herd, but we're not really sure, even if we start releasing that and healing, no, like most people around us are still in that energy. So I feel like it's
Right, but that's no excuse, right? So if we are choosing to be conscious, we have to break the mold. We have to go against the tide. We have to look at the others going nuts, with busy schedules and 10 cars in the driveway and a big fancy house, and just laugh. Because we see through the illusion of all that pomp and circumstance, and we realize that it is a cover-up for emptiness. When you're filled with yourself and you are whole, you don't need so much pomp and circumstance. For example, I drive a 2014 secondhand Mercedes, okay, like it's so shattered and tattered. And people will tell me in my neighborhood, like, your car is an eyesore compared to all the other cars. And my friends will tell me, come on, it's time to buy a new car. Even my accountant is like, can you buy a new car and charge it to the company? And I say, no, I don't need a new car. I like my car. So it's going against the tide. It's seeing, what do I need to make me happy? And if this is making me happy, why do I need to buy designer wear, fancy things, new things, if it doesn't give me any more joy than the other thing, except it fulfills my ego? Am I operating out of ego or am I operating out of internal joy? And this is a pivotal question. Am I operating out of ego or operating out of scarcity? And ego or out of joy? Ego is scarcity and fear, and joy is limitless power and purpose. So you have to ask yourself at all times, am I buying this car because it gives me joy or because it gives me ego? And most of our choices are out of ego.
Yes. My dad.
I want to send my kid to that school because it's ego.
Yes.
I want my kid to go to church because it's ego.
I went through that with my kids, like pre-planning their whole education until university, because I felt that it was what I was supposed to do in the subdivision we lived in. And then I realized I had an epiphany in my 40s that I just created a bit of a facade, but it wasn't from malice. I was just kind of doing what I thought was great. And I realized that there was that emptiness. And then I spent a couple of years kind of unwinding that and really seeking what's behind that. And my dad was a lawyer who always drove an older minivan. And I would always say, Dad, like, why don't you just get a fancy car? And for him, he was like, why? I have no attachment to that. And so it took me a while to recognize what he was trying to say, because when you're younger and a teenager, you just want your dad to have a cool car, you know. But for him, he was
Right.
sweet. So I would assume
Exactly.
I would assume that perfectionism is sort of goes a little bit hand in hand with controlling, but I know a lot of my friends, they are so afraid of not being perfect. To a point, this is how extreme it got, where there was a bit of a book club and all of the moms were nervous to have their home host it because they were afraid to be judged that their home wasn't perfect enough.
Mm,
And so, especially moms, like they have enough to deal with, you know,
right.
but
Right.
does that still come from the I'm not good enough, the same sort of energy space as the controlling? Or what would you say?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. We want to control others' perception of us. And so if they see my house and realize I'm not so wealthy or not so fancy, or I didn't hire an interior designer and got all my stuff from IKEA, that will scare me because they're going to see that I'm not amazing as I want them to see me. So it's coming from the same anxiety. I want to control other people's perception of me. I want to control how wealthy they think I am, how perfect they think I am, how loving they think I am. And this kind of controlling energy is deep anxiety, again, because we have bought into this idea that our home is a reflection of who we are. It's an aspect of who we are, for sure, but it is not who we are.
Mhm.
And if you live in a small house, doesn't mean you have a small heart or a small mind. Similarly, if you live in a big house, doesn't mean you're a better, bigger person. So we have equated such false correlations with each other. And we suffer as a result of that. So, as a spiritual seeker, we cannot expect other people to get off the bandwagon and then we will get off the bandwagon.
Right.
We need to get off the bandwagon for ourselves and give ourselves the permission to leave the situation, leave this insanity, leave the matrix. And, you know, when my daughter was 12 or 13, I had her bat mitzvah, and I'm not even religious, but I did it to fit in, to allow her to fit in, and I knew I was doing it, so I owned it. But I didn't do it in the way that everyone else did it, right? I sent an email invitation. You know, people used to send boxes and fancy things with cats and dogs inside the boxes, you know. I just sent an email. I kept it low key. I kept it simple. So there's a way that you can live in the world and really contour it to match you versus you give up who you are to match it.
Mm. I feel like it took me until I was 48 to figure what you're saying out. Like, I don't know why it took me so long, but that's how long it took me to almost give myself permission to stop the madness. Because
Yes.
I feel like I was aware of it for a good 10 years before, but there's a moment of surrender. And sometimes it doesn't happen exactly when you want it to happen. Your brain is ready, but your body can't like surrender. But I also find like when you do, like you were saying, you're creating permission for other people to also surrender to their authentic self and that they are good enough
Yes.
and they are lovable, even if their couch isn't $10,000, you know? But I feel like
Yes.
everyone's kind of waiting for someone to give them permission that you are good enough even without the stuff. So,
Yes. Yes. And it's so sad because we're all living in this illusion and everyone is waiting for the other one to show up as ordinary, and we need to do that ourselves.
mhm.
You know, I always joke that I buy all my clothes and shoes and everything from Amazon or Payless when it used to be there. And people used to tell me, don't say that out in public. And I used to say, but why not?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be spending thousands of dollars on clothes. We shouldn't. Now, should is a judgment. So, but we don't need to be, at least. And we all think that we need to. And that is the scary part. We believe we won't be good enough or accepted
Yes.
unless we are of a certain status. And this is what we teach our children. And then they grow up hungry for approval because we've taught them to direct that source of approval outside of us. We've outsourced acceptance to other people when it should be coming from within us.
Yeah. And so then we live our entire life based on other people's trying to manipulate other people's perception of us to be perfect.
Yes.
And
Yes,
then,
we're manipulating.
like, I feel like there would be deep grief on your deathbed if you realize you're not living true to who you are. Your whole life has been a bit of a facade, but that's how culture has been created. So it's like breaking the mold, and like authentic is beautiful. And that's,
Yeah, but also accepting when we can't be authentic. Like I color my hair. That's a lie. That's completely cheating. You do too. And so technically we're not authentic, and I'm just calling it what it is. And it's okay, but let's not pretend that we're all even the ones who are living authentically, there's a limit,
yeah,
right? And it's okay to have a limit. You know, I still comb my hair, I still curled it, you did too. You're wearing a gorgeous thing. I made sure the light was okay. It's okay, but recognize that that is the ego.
Mhm.
And we're never going to be completely with zero ego.
Yeah.
But the thing is to say it, right, as much as possible, to yourself at least. You don't have to tell the whole world, but you have to tell yourself, you know, I still need this. I haven't yet done away with this ego. And that's okay. It's okay. And you know how we are as women, you know, our social approval means so much to us because we are social beings even more than traditional men are. And our beauty and culture has so tortured us around this notion of being beautiful. And we have to surrender that we have bought into it. It's okay. But we have to own that we have bought into it. No one is standing with us in front of the mirror and telling us to spend 6 hours getting ready.
Yes.
We have bought into it. And that's our co-creation.
I went to a yoga retreat once, and a girl called me out in the class and she said, "Why do you color your hair? Are you not feeling fulfilled and complete just as you are to be fully
Yeah.
natural?"
Yeah.
And I think I was 25 at the time. And I was like, there was a little bit of a story that I must be bad if I'm trying to cover up. But then I realized I have friends on the total spectrum of they don't touch themselves at all. They're fully earthy and live off the earth. But I was like, but that isn't who I am either. So like you're saying, it's like you have to also feel like it feels it's your choice, you know? And just because you don't want to be fully off the grid doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it's bad.
Yes. Yeah. And I think women especially need to just stop shaming anyone else
Yeah.
if they are not on the grid, if they are on the grid, how much on the grid. Like technically we should just mind our own business
Yeah.
and do our own thing. And because I'm a teacher and so are you know, it's our responsibility to spread that message of non-judgment, you know, and to allow women to go all out if they want, to go all into the form-based world. That's where they are at. Or don't do it, but don't pretend to judge others, because I can guarantee you every human has some aspect in their life where they're still stuck in ego. There is no human who is completely authentic, not one human. Every human lies to some degree, to some extent, and that's okay. Every human keeps themselves from the authentic truth, and that's okay. So we need to just stop judging the other, you know. Oh, you know, she yells at her kids, or oh, look at her, she doesn't even comb her hair for school pickup. Oh, she had an affair. Oh, her husband left her. No, don't judge anyone, because your experiences are coming. Everyone has their own life experience and own battles to wage. And you know, I often tell people, wait, you know, don't think it won't happen to you. It may just look
Yes.
different, but all of us go through loss, betrayal, grief, fantasies crashing down and burning in hell. All of us go through. It's an authentic human experience. So we should not judge anybody and just stay to our own lane and have tolerance and compassion for everybody. I mean, that's really the easiest way to live.
Yeah, that's so true. Um, I think one thing I would love to kind of wrap up with is the topic of fear, because I know I've been getting asked more than ever before. It's like everyone's deep-rooted fears are like bubbling up to the surface where they can't suppress it as much as they could before. now, like before they could hide it or do a lot of cardio and yoga and suppress it, but it's like now their nervous system is just like nuts. And everybody is almost feeling like their fears are kind of showing in their face. Um, and I wondered if you could just talk about what you're seeing in terms of like deep-rooted fears coming to the surface, and like, is it time to kind of move through them to, I know, I used to listen to Pema Chodron, and she would talk about like, there comes a point where you have to touch your fears to move past them. What are you suggesting to clients who are really finding fear is more than ever before is impacting them?
Yeah, the thing with fear is you have to befriend it. You have to really look at it and go, wow, I am so afraid of losing control of my marriage or my children or my youth or my success, and really process through it, hopefully with a coach, to see, to finally arrive at a place where you can see that you are greater and more than that relationship with your children, or more than your marriage. You're more than your youth. And you have to sit in that power, that empowerment, that you don't need your youth or your children or your marriage to define you. You don't need your success to define you. But for that to happen, you have to have a deep spiritual practice that teaches you to really steadfastly connect with your inner being and have a very robust marriage with yourself.
Yeah, that is good. And I feel like it's a vulnerable time. So for you, you do agree, you do think that having somebody to support through that process is important, because I know me working through mine, and that fear of losing security, or a lot of people right now are having the big fears around money coming up, because they're hearing about it in the, in the external world, and it's bringing up their own insecurities around, I'm not taken care of. So I find I'm getting asked a lot, what do I do? Because like I can barely function, my anxiety, and then they're focusing on the fear, all day long. And
Right.
so I think that just a couple of strategies. So for you, just developing that spiritual practice, and for anybody listening who might be like, is there somewhere I can start? Do you have any suggestions for just some simple things?
Well, everybody needs help to start. So, joining a course or a community, I have courses, I have a community, I have a coaching institute. Spiritual teachers, wisdom teachers do have things. You may have to invest some money, but you have to get the guidance. I think, in Eastern spirituality, they say the first thing you have to do is find a teacher. And what that means is you have to follow a program. You have to get guidance. It's like going to a gym and you don't even know how to use the machinery. So it's not a weakness to join a course or start a program or read a book. You have to start somewhere. You can't just turn on the light bulb of awareness and sustain it by yourself. Getting help is the first step. Even just booking 3 sessions with somebody who's a leader, a psychologist, a counselor, it could make the world of difference. And then they will point out what you specifically need for your issues. I say that the minimum first requirement is a year of tutelage, of really becoming a student and being a seeker. People think that they can just like, drink water in the morning and, sit for 2 minutes in silence, and that's going to change their life. It's not.
Yeah, I have friends who have been like meditating for a year on being in a space of abundance. And a year later, they're like, it doesn't seem to be working. So I think it's,
Yeah.
like you were saying, I think mentorship and being surrounded by people who are where you want to be and are emotionally free. I think for me, emotional freedom is something that I aspire to just be, unwavering. Doesn't matter how people treat you. It doesn't matter what gets projected on you. You are in your space of grace and your space of power. And I admire people who teach on that and live that way. And I think that's one of the reasons why I invited you to speak at my conference in October and having you at the Auric Living Conference. And then also learning about your Conscious Coaching Institute. I know you have several online events and you have several events for it, but can you tell us just a little bit about that and how we can learn more?
Yeah, so I teach all the time. I have courses. I have an amazing coaching institute where I teach people to become their own coach and then also develop it as a business model for others and coach others. It's a 5-month program. It's fabulous. It's always filled up, all seats filled up. And I have people from all over the world. It's all online. So for people who are curious about, developing coaching as a business practice, I strongly recommend them to join my institute. It's literally invaluable. People say it is, and it transforms their lives, their children's lives, their relationships, and then they can also make money from it. But yeah, joining the shelter and the guidance of a teacher is so important. Somebody you respect, somebody you admire, and you can have many teachers, not just one. But I think somebody who's further along the path than you, they can direct you in a very beautiful way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know that my most monumental years have been when I've been um, in a mentorship with somebody that I truly admire in terms of integrity and wisdom and love. So thank you. And we'll also share the link. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Dr. Shefali, thank you for your time and your grace and your
Thank you.
full energy. We so appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, love.